30 Minutes with Ron. It is, let's see, Monday, March 13th, 2006. This is Ron Gagliardi. I'm here at Ashler Village in Wallingford. And the gentleman that you are looking at is the person known as Sterling Jewett. He is 90 years old, or 90 years young in his case. And he was a 72-year resident of Cheshire, having moved here recently. And this is going to be like a This Is Your Life of Sterling Jewett. And he will regale us with tunes and stories and all kinds of goodies. So, good evening, Sterling. How you doing?
It's good to see you. Ron, I've always admired you for all you do for Cheshire.
Oh, thank you.
Your artwork, and it's great that you are doing this for me tonight because I do want to leave something.
Well, you deserve it. All right, let's go back to your early days. First of all, who are your parents?
My parents were Harry F. Jewett and Isabel Turner Jewett. They met at the telephone company in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where she counted the money my father would pick up from the pay stations.
Huh.
And my sister, well, they were married actually April 15th, 1912, the day the Titanic hit an iceberg and sank.
Wow.
And we have a record. $1.50 is what it cost them to hire a wagon to take them to the railroad station. But my sister Thelma Holt, who became a teacher in Cheshire for most of her life, she was born in Bridgeport 1913.
Okay.
My twin brother Stiles and I were born also in Bridgeport, September 9th, 1915. I was born at 7 o'clock and he was born by surprise at 7:15.
Oh, a surprise twin. That's a shock, I'll bet.
And my younger sister Ruth was born in Cheshire in 1920. So there were 4 kids.
All right, when did you come to Cheshire?
Well, here's what happened. We lived in Bridgeport and then moved to New Haven, where my father worked for the, actually it's the Repeating Arms Company.
Yeah, Winchester.
Winchester
Yeah.
Repeating Arms Company. And he was on the baseball team there with Albie Booth's father. I don't know whether you remember Albie Booth.
I know the legend of him.
He was a famous quarterback on the Yale football team.
Yeah.
But what happened, we lived on Bassett Street where the motor vehicle department was located for a while. And then we moved to Cheshire in 1918. And our property was located on the west side of Mountain Road, right near the corner of Route 42, also known as North Brooksville Road. And across the street from us was Charlie Ward's farm and barn and home. But on our property, we were lucky. We had Roaring Brook going right behind our house. And a sturdy bridge was constructed over the brook. And beyond that, we had our 2-story cow barn. We had 1 cow, and of course the loft ahead was where we stored our hay. Beyond that, we had a pasture and a hay field. We raised our own vegetables for our own use. And I remember my mother canning beans, corn, tomatoes, applesauce, and she made jams and jellies. And beyond that, we had an area with large trees and underbrush. And when my brother and I were 9 years old, we were walking through the woods and we were scared. We saw 3 graves, 2 adult graves and a smaller grave. And the mounds of dirt were very symmetrical, but there were little trees and brush growing up out of these 3 mounds. And it was a real scary event in our lives, and we never told any about it. But years and years later, my wife Jane and my sister-in-law, child's widow, went over to see Mrs. Arthur Edmonds, who lived in the house that used to be our cow barn. She and her daughter were there, and we told her we had seen those graves unmarked, and wondered if she ever knew anything about them. She said, "Why, yes. Several years ago, a man was making a path in the woods, and he had his bulldozer, and he dug up 2 gravestones, and they are now being used in my walkway right beside my house, and you can look at them to see if there's any information that would be of interest to you." So we turned the gravestones over, and we could not read the names of the deceased, but there were some numbers on and some letters at the base of these gravestones, but they didn't mean anything to us. But getting back to our farm, we had 13 acres, and it was interesting because on the east side of Roaring Brook, there was a mound of dirt, maybe 2 or 3 feet high, and it ran for maybe 30 or 40 or 50 feet along the east bank of the brook. And we recalled stories. There had been a mill there, and it made barrel staves. There was nothing left as a reminder of that mill except for this mound of dirt, which was a sluiceway that would channel the water to the paddle wheel.
Huh.
So that was kind of exciting. And I often thought about those 3 graves. Maybe the people buried there may have had something to do with the ownership of the property or the mill. And someday it would be wonderful if someone could check the Historical Society or the Town Hall to see if they could find any record of those departed people.
Yeah, it'd be good to know.
My brother and I enjoyed Roaring Brook because it had a lot of trout in it, and we made a dam that was almost watertight. We took stones, large and small, from out of the brook and mixed sod and turf it was like a stone wall. And boy, we had a wonderful swimming pool that came up to our shoulders. And but the interesting thing is, all the kids went to Hummiston School at the time by motorized buses or the trolley car.
Yep.
But about 16 of us from our area known as Brooksvale, we went by horse and wagon owned by Charlie Ward. The wagon actually had a flat roof on top with a fringe around it, and you entered in the back, and there were benches on each side, so we'd face each other. And the fellows would always try to grab the seats nearest the back end because the horses didn't smell too nice at times. And I don't think the girls caught on why we did this. But my sister Thelma was kind of a favorite of Charlie Ward's, and he would invite her to sit up front and have a couple of candies. Now we had a stocky fella jump on the back end of that step where we got into the wagon and made the wagon go up and down. Charlie Ward stopped the horses, grabbed his whip, and ran around to see if he could catch the culprit, and he didn't because the fella got back in. But if we had enough snow, he would go by sleigh. And of course, our family, we lived there on Mountain Road until 1927, so in the 20s we went by horse and wagon. And but when there was enough snow, one day we had plenty of snow, but at noontime it turned to rain, so we were all let out of Hummiston School early so we could get home before the snow melted on Route 10. And there was a shed over at St. Peter's Church next door where Charlie Ward would keep his horses and his bucket of oats. But as true as can be, he would use used straw on the bottom of the sleigh to keep our feet warm. And we smelled, we reeked with horse smell when we got Elmiston School, so everybody knew we came from the sleigh. But going on, I would like to mention that my twin brother and I went to Hill House High School and graduated in 1934. My sister Thelma also went to Hill House High in New Haven, graduated in 1927. And no, it was 1931, I imagine. She graduated from Humston in 27. But nevertheless, she went to normal school and was certified as a teacher.
Right, normal school became Southern Connecticut State College, which is now Southern
Yeah.
Connecticut State University, yep.
And she taught most of her life, as I mentioned, until she retired in the school systems in Cheshire.
And she taught at Humston as
Yeah.
well, that school that she graduated.
All four of us went to Humston,
Yeah.
and my twin brother Stiles and Thelma went to Hill House because we had no high school in Cheshire.
Right.
And my younger sister Ruth went to Hampton High School.
What year did she graduate?
She graduated from Humston in 1934. And so
Hampden High
1938.
lived in 38. My father graduated in 37 from Hampden High.
Is that right, from Hill House?
Hampden High,
Oh, Hampton High.
yeah, so he was in the same school.
Well, an interesting thing, when we graduated from Hill House High in 1934, Dick Lee was a member of our class, and he became the
Mayor of New Haven.
Mayor of New Haven.
Yep.
And when we had our 25th anniversary of Hill House High graduation, well, there was Dick Lee, and he was calling everybody by name. He must have gone through the class book to refresh his memory, because he says, "Hello, Sterling, how's your twin brother Stiles?" And I was quite impressed that he would remember. But an interesting thing happened. After I graduated from high school, I got a phone call saying they needed a piano player and a typist up at Camp Hook, a CCC camp at State. It's actually on the bank of the Swans Pond, which is near the northern end of Candlewood Lake. And one of the persons interested in me was Jack Wolf, who had formerly worked at the Cheshire Nursery, and I used to give the children piano lessons. So he knew I played the piano.
Right.
And then there was another fellow, Danny Davis, who knew me. And he told everybody that I was the third best typist in Connecticut in the speed contest typing. I didn't even know how to type. So for 3 weeks, I spent 3 and 4 hours completing a whole course that would normally take a semester at high school. And I faithfully did not turn a page until I was very proficient. It said on each page, do not turn this page until you've mastered it completely. So I was able to do 65 words a minute and ultimately 85 words a minute, and they never questioned my
Right.
typing.
We should add that CCC stands for Civilian Conservation Corps.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. And what happened, I organized a eight-piece band there, and we would walk over the causeway that separated Swans Pond with Candlewood Lake to a dance hall they called Joyceland. And of our 8 musicians, one of them, Johnny Zanzar from Danbury, who was in charge of the dynamite crew that blew up the rock that made the 10 miles of roadway along that we built. He did the square dance calling, and we 8 fellows went down to New York City in 1935, and we were auditioned by Major Bowes at the original amateur hour.
That became the Ted Mack.
Yes,
Hour.
and
Yes.
they signed us up, but a week or 2 before we were to go on, they said, we've had too many hillbilly bands. We'll see you maybe in a month or 2. In the meantime, we were shipped out to Oregon, 27 of us, to be head of another CCC camp,
Yeah.
30 miles from the Pacific. But an interesting thing happened. Years went by, and I was on the Ted Mack Amateur Hour playing the accordion on 3 occasions. And
Wow.
I'll tell you that later. But the interesting thing about the CCC camp, it was just like being in the Army, except we had no guns. And I could write a book on some of the pranks that were played on fellows. We had a fellow that was a substitute bugle player to play taps.
Yep.
And he was bragging about his ability. So a couple of fellows hid in the bushes, and as he was playing taps, they threw eggs at him. And the poor fellow, I really did feel sorry for him. He played taps, but it never sounded quite right. You could tell when the eggs were almost hitting him. But it was a great experience. We did perform on WTIC a few times, and we entertained many civic groups and performed in the local theater in Danbury. And an interesting thing happened. At the dance hall, I saw a brunette, and I asked if I might dance with her while the band played. And her name was Arlene Lee. She was a school. She wanted to be a school teacher. She was still going to school.
Right.
And we had a couple of dates, and her father was the president and owner of the Lee Hat Factory, which is out of business, but it was very famous then, and she gave me a hat. A nice felt hat that was worth quite a bit of money, and I often wondered what happened to her. But when we got our discharge, Danny Davis, my buddy, and I, when we got our discharge from the CCC on May 5th, 1936, we were in Oregon, and we had 30 days stopover privileges on the Pullman train. So we stopped at Sacramento and hitchhiked to Reno, Carson City, Virginia City, and we would put up at places for free. We worked at a ranch one night, and then we went on down to San Francisco, and we stayed there at a flop house over a bar in San Francisco Bay, and the bed bugs were so bad we could hardly sleep. At a count of 3, Danny Davis would turn on the light, and we'd both pull back our covers, and we could see the bed bugs gather. But it only cost us 75 cents a night. The second night, for $1, we got a nice place with no bed bugs. But an interesting thing happened. When we left San Francisco, we stopped at the post office in Los Angeles to get our mail, general delivery. And Danny called a fella and his wife, who used to live in New Haven, and said, we're looking for a place to stay overnight. They said, we don't have an extra bedroom, but go to the Jewett home for wayfarers and tell them you're looking for a job. Well, we had traveler's checks on us, but we didn't want anybody to know it. We wanted to get home and still have some money left. So we went to the Jewish home for wayfarers, and I said, Danny, I don't know any Jewish. He said, I don't either. We were not very active going to the synagogue, but I can tell you one thing. You can learn to say, Hak ben China. I said, what does that mean? He said, it means quit bending my ear. And I said, I don't know whether I'll be able to use that or not. But he said, Sterling, go by the name of Harry Jewett, because Sterling might sound a little bit Christian. So a strange thing happened. They questioned him, and he had to pull out a card that had YMHA on it to prove that he was Jewish.
I didn't question
Well, anyway, we told him we were going out looking for a job. Instead, we hitchhiked and got a ride with an outfit that made deliveries of packages in Hollywood, and we saw where Clark Gable lived, where Jean Harlow lived, and many others. And we took a trip over to Catalina Island and back, and saw the place where Wrigley had his summer home, and also Zane Grey. It was quite exciting. But when we got back, they said, guess what? We've got a job for you starting tomorrow at Culver City at the MGM open door lot, which covers about 53 acres of scenery. So we said, what's the job? They said, well, you're going to have to load up scrap metal on dump trucks. And your boss is our son. It was the one that we had called up, and he needed a couple of fellows to help. So a man with an acetylene torch would cut up all the scrap metal, like a wrecked airplane, a wrecked taxi cab, and some things that were used in a prison scene. And we would throw it up on the dump truck, and then we would drive down to Wilmington Harbor, the harbor for Los Angeles, where a Japanese freighter, this was in 1936, a Japanese freighter with a great big crane on it, it had a huge magnet on it the shape of a top, probably 10 feet long and maybe 6 feet in diameter. The crane would come right over the load on our dump truck, they turn on the juice, and the whole load would go and be dumped into the hold of this Japanese freighter. And I often wondered if that metal was used for their war effort. But it was an interesting thing. While we were working there, every time they were shooting a picture, a movie, all work had to stop so that there would be no sound when they were shooting the picture. There would be no background noises. So when they weren't, when we were not working, we were watching Jean Harlow's double being go through the take. She was doing the routine according to the script. And when they had finished the lighting and timing, the director said, we're ready for Miss Harlow. So Danny Davis and I followed him over to this beautiful trailer. The door opened and there was a handsome Yale graduate playing mood music for Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow came out in this lovely, beautiful dress, and we were about 3 feet from her. I don't think security would allow that
No,
today.
not today.
But while we were working, Danny Davis saw Clark Gable and also Shirley Temple, and I was sorry that I missed that opportunity. But we did see Vivian Leigh and Paul Muni being filmed in The Good Earth with a Chinese wall in the background and about 150 coolies dressed up like coolies.
Yeah.
And it was a marvelous experience. But then we went on our train to El Paso, Texas, where we walked across over into Mexico and saw the sights in that area, including a bunch of teenagers that were swimming in the Rio Grande in their birthday suits. That was kind of interesting. And then we went on to New Orleans, and at New Orleans we hitchhiked back to Connecticut.
Yeah.
I had to be there in time for my sister Thelma's wedding, where she was married in the St. Peter's Church to Burton Holt. But the trip up was quite easy for us. What we would do is go to big trucking firms, tell them we were heading for Connecticut. Are any trucks going north? And oftentimes we'd say, yes, we're going in a few minutes, 200 or 300 miles. We'll take you, but you gotta go down the road so our boss won't see us. So we go down a block or two and then they pick us up. And some of the drivers went 85 miles an hour down hills. It was scary.
Wow.
But we went through Cincinnati, Columbus, Ohio, and then an interesting thing happened. We stayed in a boxcar in Hebron, Ohio, 7 miles from Denison University. I never heard of Denison University, but 3 months later, on my 21st birthday, I entered Denison University. And I'll tell you that story in a minute. But the thing is this, we had a chance before going to sleep that night in the boxcar. There was a pump there, and we were able to bathe in the dark. And around midnight, a train went by. It must have been going 80, 90 miles an hour, and it shook our car. It scared the dickens out of us. But we went on and got to Washington, D.C., and then up to New York. And our last night on the road, we slept in a car that was unlocked underneath an elevator in New York City. We didn't get much sleep.
No, but
So the next day he arrived in New Haven, and I arrived home. And my mother made me keep all my clothes and everything out on the porch. She was afraid I might have lice or bed bugs. But an interesting thing happened. I was called to be the part-time organist that summer at the Methodist Church. And I was playing the hymns I was going to use the next day on Sunday. And in came a couple just married on their honeymoon, visiting the minister and his wife. And this gentleman was a high school teacher in Mount Vernon, Ohio. He was an organist and an antique dealer as a hobby and a way of earning money. He said, "Are you going to college? I'm an organist and I'm kind of interested in you." I said, "All I have is $300. He said, "You're going to go to Denison University. I'll get you a job so you can work your way through." He kept his word, and like I said, on my 21st birthday, September 9th, 1936, I entered Denison University. He introduced me to the business manager, Al Johnson, who was a Lambda Chi Alpha fraternity man. So was this fellow I met at the Methodist Church. His name was Mr. Wintermute. And he introduced me to Dr. Detweiler, the head of the sociology department, because I was a sociology major. I became his secretary. I became secretary in typing, doing office work and typing for the business manager and also Dr. Detweiler. Then they got me a job at the dining hall of 180 girl students, where my wife, future wife, ate. So I had 4 years of free meals, 3 a day, just by working first as a waiter and then as a counterman, assisting the waiters.
right. All because of playing at the Methodist Church.
Then another thing that happened, they paid me 33 1/3 cents an hour. So for every hour, every 3 hours, I would make $1. They paid me for playing the trumpet in the marching band. They paid me for playing the French horn or the timpani in the symphony orchestra. I was paid to sing in the tenor in the glee club. And I was organist. I took organ lessons for 1 semester, but it required so many hours of practice, I just couldn't do it anymore because I had to study too much on my other subjects.